Today we have a crazy revenge story about a wife cheating on her military husband. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, it wasn't just enough that I ruined my ex-boyfriend's life. It had to stay ruined. My college days in the late 90s were a mix of excitement and discovery. I was navigating the world of academia, making new friends, and dreaming about the future. It was during this time that I met Jake through mutual friends. Jake, at 23, had already graduated and was preparing to move across the country for grad school. Coincidentally, I had plans to move with friends to a place only a 90-minute drive from where he was headed. Our connection was instant and undeniable. We bonded over our shared love for animals, our passion for learning, and our dreams for the future. Jake was charming and intelligent and seemed to be everything I could ever want in a partner. Our whirlwind romance felt like something out of a fairy tale. We spent countless hours talking about our dreams and making plans for the future. Jake had 2 sisters and a younger brother, all of whom I quickly became close with. His family welcomed me with open arms, and I felt like I had found a second family. One of the most influential people I met through Jake was Mary, his advisor's wife. Mary worked in administration at the university and was a warm, caring person. We often had lunch together during my weekend visits, and she became a confidant and mentor to me. Weekends were the highlight of my life back then. Every Friday after classes, I would pack a small bag and drive 90 minutes to Jake's place. His house was a cozy, modest rental he shared with 2 roommates, both fellow animal sciences students. Money was tight, but we found joy in the simple things. Our taco dates were a favorite tradition, where we'd spend hours talking about everything under the sun. Jake's animal breeding business was fascinating. His room was filled with various cages and tanks, housing small creatures he meticulously cared for. He was particularly proud of the rare species he managed to breed, some of which I had never seen before. I loved helping him with feeding and cleaning, and learning more about the animals with each visit. It was a world I had never been a part of, and I relished every moment. Through Jake, I met many people in his program, forming close bonds. Mary, his advisor's wife, became more than just a friend. She was a mentor and a confidant. We would often meet for lunch, where she'd share wisdom about life and relationships. Her warmth and kindness made me feel truly welcome in their academic circle. It was a sunny afternoon when Jake's harsh words hit me like a cold gust of wind. He expressed concerns about my weight, saying it made it harder for him to be attracted to me. His words left me stunned and hurt, but I managed to stay calm. I asked him what he thought we should do about it, hoping for a constructive conversation, but he had no solution, no plan, just criticism. I decided to not engage in a fight over it, but the comment lingered in my mind, creating a subtle tension between us. I tried to push it aside, hoping it was a one-time issue, but it was a sign of deeper problems I hadn't yet seen. 3 months after Jake's hurtful comment about my weight, things between us had grown tense. One evening, as we sat in his living room surrounded by his beloved animals, Jake dropped another bombshell. He said he was ending our relationship because I lacked the scientific knowledge to keep up with him. His words felt rehearsed, like he had been planning this conversation for a while. I could see the discomfort in his eyes, but he masked it with a facade of intellectual superiority. I was taken aback. His reason made no sense, and deep down, I knew it wasn't the truth. Despite my calm exterior, a storm was brewing inside me. I didn't press him further, sensing there was more he wasn't telling me. A month later, my suspicions were confirmed. Jake admitted he had been seeing one of his undergraduate students, Meg, a 19-year-old who was smitten by him. His confession stung like a fresh wound, reopening all the hurt I had tried to bury. In the days following the breakup, I was a mess of emotions. My heart ached with a deep sense of betrayal and sadness. I had invested so much in our relationship, only to be discarded for someone else. The realization that Jake had been manipulating me into breaking up with him made it even worse. It wasn't just the cheating that hurt, it was the deceit and the calculated way he had gone about it. Despite the pain, I was determined to move on. I focused on my studies, my friends, and my future. Yet the anger lingered, simmering beneath the surface. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jake had gotten away with something terrible. I knew I had to let go, but the thought of him moving on without any consequences gnawed at me. That's when I decided that I couldn't just let it slide. I had to do something to make things right, not just for myself, but for anyone else he might hurt in the future. The more I thought about Jake's betrayal, the more determined I became to make him face the consequences. I decided to reach out to Jake's roommates, using email as my weapon of choice. It was the early 2000s and texting wasn't quite the norm yet. I thanked them for their friendship and subtly mentioned the breakup. To my surprise, they were open about the real reason behind the split. They confessed that Jake had been seeing Meg, the undergrad student, and they had been pushing him to come clean about the affair. One of Jake's roommates, George, a super nice and charming guy, took it upon himself to help me. He invited me to visit for the weekend to collect my belongings and catch up. His offer came with the promise of a fun time, and I accepted. I was ready to gather the evidence I needed to ensure Jake's reckoning. When I arrived at Jake's house, the place was eerily familiar but tinged with a sense of finality. Jake was out, which gave me the perfect opportunity to snoop around. I carefully took photos of all the animals in the house, paying special attention to the endangered species he was illegally keeping. Jake had always boasted about his collection, but I knew he was breaking laws by housing some of these creatures. That evening, George and I went out for drinks as planned. We made a grand entrance back at Jake's place around midnight, laughing loudly and stumbling as if we were inebriated. I made sure to wear a short dress and acted as if George was practically carrying me. Jake and Meg were lounging in the living room, and I wanted them to see me, looking disheveled, and George proudly displaying his gentlemanly behavior. Our loud, exaggerated interactions were intended to make Jake and Meg uncomfortable. George paraded around in his boxers while we giggled and moaned playfully. It was juvenile, but I needed to make Jake feel the sting of his actions, and I hoped to humiliate him a bit in front of Meg. The plan worked perfectly. Jake's face turned red with anger and embarrassment, while Meg looked away, her discomfort evident. The next morning, I said my goodbyes, leaving with a smirk and a donut in hand. Jake's final words about my supposed whorish behavior didn't bother me. I was focused on the bigger picture. I had what I needed and set the stage for Jake's downfall, feeling a satisfying sense of anticipation for what was to come. I compiled the photos of the illegal animals and wrote a detailed report about Jake's activities. I submitted this report to the State Office of Fish and Wildlife, making sure to include as much information as possible to ensure they took it seriously. I knew this would hit Jake where it hurt most, his passion for animals and his illegal business. At the same time, George and the other roommate, who had become quite supportive of my plan, wrote formal complaints to the university. They detailed Jake's inappropriate relationship with Meg, including how he'd used his position of authority to pursue her. Their complaints were thorough and damning, setting the stage for Jake's professional downfall. The fallout from my actions was swift and unforgiving. The state officials arrived at Jake's house within days, conducting a thorough search and seizing all the animals, including the endangered species. Jake's once proud collection was dismantled, and he faced hefty fines and legal battles over his illegal activities. The university wasn't far behind in taking action. They promptly revoked Jake's scholarship and terminated his teaching position. The university's decision was fueled by the evidence provided and the negative publicity surrounding the complaints. Jake's academic career came to a screeching halt as he was unable to complete his PhD. His future in the field was effectively destroyed, and he was left scrambling to pick up the pieces of his shattered career. Jake's life unraveled swiftly after the fallout from my actions. His financial situation became dire as he struggled to pay the hefty fines imposed for his illegal animal trade. The loss of his scholarship and teaching position left him without a steady income, and his attempts to secure other academic roles were met with failure due to his tainted reputation. His once promising career in animal sciences was effectively destroyed, and he found himself struggling to make ends meet. On a personal level, Jake's marriage to Meg, which had initially seemed like a bright spot in his life, became strained under the weight of their mounting financial problems. The stress of his professional failures and the public embarrassment took a toll on their relationship, leading to frequent arguments and growing resentment. Jake's relationships with his siblings also suffered. They were disappointed by the scandal and the damage it caused to their family's name. His once close connections with his family and friends became distant and strained, as they struggled to reconcile with the person Jake had become. The impact of his actions rippled through every aspect of his life, leaving him isolated. Years later, I found myself thriving in my career, giving a lecture at a prestigious university. It was a significant achievement, and the room was filled with eager students and faculty. As I mingled with the audience, my heart skipped a beat when I saw a familiar face, Jake. He was there interviewing for a teaching position, a cruel twist of fate considering our past. I couldn't resist the opportunity to make a final strike. In a casual conversation with the department chair, I mentioned Jake's notorious history with his previous university, including his scandalous behavior and legal troubles. The chair seemed taken aback and promised to look into it further. A few days later, I learned through my friend Mary that Jake's background check had unveiled the full extent of his past misdeeds. His arrest record and academic failures were revealed, and the university decided not to hire him. It was a satisfying turn of events. Reflecting now as to those many years ago, I see that the universe had a way of balancing things out, and I had played a small part in ensuring that justice was served. Yes, it was about revenge for me, but still, it was about getting the truth and the importance of standing up for oneself. My experiences taught me that self-worth should never be compromised by someone else's flaws. If someone who's supposed to love you criticizes you or tries to manipulate you, it's crucial to recognize it as their issue, not yours. Moving on and finding strength in oneself is the true path to healing. I'm grateful for the lessons learned and the growth I've achieved, knowing that sometimes a gentle nudge is all it takes for karma to work its magic. Look, I'm not going to condone cheating or anything, that's certainly not okay, but I think it's kind of ironic that OP is talking about moving on and finding strength in oneself when you literally went out of your way to ruin this guy's life. He's probably never going to be able to get a job again. So, did he deserve it? I don't know. I don't really think that's for you to decide. He cheated on you, he did you wrong, you should have just moved on. I think probably went a little too far here with the revenge arc. Our next story is, don't go to your ex's wedding to make trouble. Sometimes things do not go the exact way we want, and for some of us, it happens this way on days that we desperately want everything to go the way we plan. I mean, every single thing that we can possibly think of. Well, some of us is actually me. My name is Christabel, and ever since I was a little girl, I've always dreamed of my perfect wedding day. I'm the kind of person who believes in fairy tales and happy endings, so finding my Prince Charming and planning our big day has been a dream come true. I was the kind of person who would stress over little things that did not matter much. Now think about what the stress level would be like when planning a wedding. I wanted everything to be perfect, just as I dreamed of it as a kid. This was not all about me. Here and there, I've heard people call me kind and thoughtful because I looked out for others, and at other times, my friends have casually said I was the one thing holding the group together. This means that I found a way to balance my overbearing, perfect pitch attitude with looking after the people I cared about. It was my wedding day, and the wedding was not just about marrying the love of my life. It was a way to celebrate the trials we had to pass through all of our relationships. From the denial, to the fight to avoid being in love, to every single stress, fight, tear, and argument that we had to push through. It all made the day worth celebrating, and I wanted it to be as perfect as possible. So I put my heart and soul into planning every detail, from the flowers to the music, to ensure it's a day we'll all remember. Mostly me and Toby. I needed it to go well because it was the start of a new chapter in our lives, and I wanted nothing to taint the start of our life together forever. The venue we chose was a beautiful garden with blooming flowers, twinkling fairy lights, and a view that took my breath away. It was like stepping into a magical world, just as I had always imagined. We had invited all our closest family and friends, about 100 people, to share that special day with us. Everyone was so excited and had been incredibly supportive throughout the planning process. The atmosphere was full of joy and anticipation. The guests were arriving, dressed in their finest, and the air was filled with laughter and the scent of fresh flowers. The string quartet was playing softly in the background, adding to the enchanting feel of the place. Our wedding planner had done an amazing job coordinating everything, and it seemed like nothing could go wrong. As I stood there, looking around at the beautiful setup and all the happy faces, I felt a surge of excitement and nerves. This was the day I had been dreaming of my whole life, and I couldn't wait to walk down the aisle and start this new journey with Toby by my side. Everything was perfect, and I knew it was going to be the most magical day ever. But it was not. Not completely, and this all happened because of Jordan. Jordan and I had a complicated history. We dated for 3 years during college. At first, everything was great. Jordan was charming and ambitious like every student in college before they get thrown into the real world. Undoubtedly, we shared many common interests, and it was one of the reasons we stayed together for 3 good years, despite what my friends thought of him and vice versa, if I'm to be honest. His friends never really accepted that I was the best person for him either, but we refused to let that be the reason not to be together. We were inseparable, and I thought he might be the one. However, as time went on, I began to see a different side of him. Jordan became increasingly possessive and controlling. He didn't like it when I spent time with my friends or pursued my interests that didn't include him. Our relationship slowly turned toxic, and it became clear we wanted different things in life. And at some point, I could not defend him to my friends when they raised a side eye to him or something he did. After countless arguments and a lot of soul searching, I decided to end things with Jordan. It was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make, but I knew it was the right one. I needed to find myself again and pursue my own happiness. Jordan didn't take the breakup well. He pleaded, got angry, and finally he distanced himself. I moved on and eventually met Toby, who was everything I ever wanted in a partner. I did not have to bother or think about Jordan for the longest time, at least not until when Toby proposed to me on his birthday. When Jordan heard about my engagement to Toby, he was livid. He couldn't stand the idea that I had found happiness without him. I never expected to hear from him or see him, but for some reason, one of my closest friends thought it was a good idea to troll him by sending him the pictures from my engagement to his DM on Facebook. She said she wanted to show him that I had found someone who beat him in every way possible. I had no idea she had reached out to him until I got a disturbing message from Jordan on Instagram. His message was infuriating, as he tried to twist the reasons for our breakup from several years ago as me being freakishly controlling and insinuating that I had somehow cheated on him with Toby. At first, I dismissed the message, deciding not to give him a reaction because I believed that was what he was after. But when he ambushed me on my daily evening run, I could see the threat and jealousy in his eyes. I saw the spiteful way he sneered when I mentioned Toby's name or spoke about him on that singular encounter. And while it seemed unbelievable to anyone who knew our relationship during college, deep down, Jordan believed he should have been the one standing next to me at the altar, not Toby. The whole thing made me run home and explain to Toby all that had happened. Thankfully, I was honest with him from the onset about the relationship I had with Jordan before we met, so he wasn't really oblivious to the type of person that Jordan was. Together, we decided that it was best I did not give Jordan a chance to run into me on the days leading to the wedding. It was all in a bid to avoid the physical altercation I knew Jordan was hoping for. The Jordan I saw that day was unlike the one I knew in college. There was this unfamiliar edge of jealousy and resentment that radiated from him. And as my wedding day approached, I could guess from his actions that Jordan's jealousy turned into a burning desire for revenge. He couldn't accept that I had moved on and was about to have the perfect wedding he felt should have been his. We had spoken countless times about our individual dream wedding over the years, and fueled by bitterness and a twisted sense of prejudice, Jordan devised a plan to sabotage the dream wedding that I had told him about. I could guess that he was riding on the thought that if he could not be happy, I should not have a chance at being happy either. Before the day of the wedding, I did not hear from Jordan for a long time. A part of me wanted to believe that he was tired of acting like a child and had gone back to the shell he crawled out of, but I knew better. He was not the kind of person to back down from a challenge. He never was, and I did not think that part of him had changed. But on the eve of the wedding, I got a text from a number I did not have saved in my contacts. We were returning from the bridal shower dinner when I heard my phone's notification jingle. The content of the message showed me that he had tailed and watched us for most of the dinner, but what scared me most out of the message was the way he ended it. You think you're going to have a perfect day, but you have no idea what's coming. You deserve this for leaving me. It sounded like a threat, but I kept it to myself. I could have told Toby instantly, but I did not want this to hang over our wedding day. He did not deserve to have his wedding day ruined, and he wasn't the one with the deranged ex. I was. The morning of the wedding, everything seemed to be going smoothly. I was getting ready with my bridesmaids when I noticed a panicked look on our wedding planner's face. She rushed over and whispered urgently to me, "Christabel, we have a problem. The flowers are missing, and the caterer says they never received the final payment, so they're refusing to come." My heart dropped. Without anyone telling me, I knew this had to be Jordan's doing. He must have intercepted the payments and somehow tampered with the arrangements. I took a deep breath and decided not to let him ruin my day. I rallied my bridesmaids, and we quickly made alternate plans. We called a local florist who managed to get us some beautiful arrangements last minute, and a nearby restaurant agreed to cater the event. As we were solving these issues, I asked them to double check with every other person that was expected to make the wedding smooth, and as I expected, my maid of honor, Lucy, came to me with more bad news. "Christabel, the DJ just called. He got an email from you this morning canceling his services." How that happened, I still have no idea, and I felt my blood begin to boil. I knew I had to act fast. I grabbed my phone and called a friend who was a fantastic amateur DJ. He agreed to step in and save the day. Despite the last-minute chaos, the ceremony started without a hitch. As I walked down the aisle, I saw Toby's reassuring smile, and I knew we would get through this together. But my relief was short-lived. During the reception, I saw Jordan lurking near the edge of the garden. He had a smug look on his face, clearly enjoying the trouble he had caused. I decided it was time to confront him. I walked over to Jordan, my heart pounding. "What are you doing here, Jordan? Why can't you just leave us alone?" He smirked and said, "I told you, Christabel, you don't deserve happiness after what you did to me." Refusing to let him intimidate me, I said, "You need to move on, Jordan. This is my day, and nothing you do will ruin it. You've only shown everyone here how bitter and petty you are." Our exchange caught the attention of some guests, including Toby. He came over, putting a protective arm around me. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his eyes narrowing at Jordan. "Yes," I said firmly. Jordan was just leaving. Just as I was about to walk away, Jordan did something unexpected. He grabbed the microphone from the DJ and called for everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I have something to say about this so-called perfect couple." The crowd fell silent, and I felt a wave of dread. Jordan began to rant about our past relationship, twisting the truth and trying to paint me as the villain. I could see the confusion and shock on the faces of our guests, but then something amazing happened just before I could turn around to run from the venue or bury my head in shame. Lucy, my maid of honor, grabbed a microphone from the other side of the room and interrupted him. "Actually, everyone," she said, "I think you should know the real story." She began to calmly explain Jordan's controlling behavior during our relationship and how he had tried to sabotage the wedding out of spite. She knew almost everything that transpired between me and Jordan in college and the aftermath, so she wasn't short for words. With every word, the crowd's sympathy shifted from Jordan to me. People began to murmur and shake their heads. Jordan's face turned red as he realized his plan had backfired. Toby's best man, who was a police officer, stepped forward and escorted Jordan out of the venue. As they left, the guests burst into applause, showing their support for me and Toby. The day was far from perfect, but at least Jordan got what he deserved. The humiliation and the charges he had to pay was a delight. So I've been to weddings, I've also dated several weddings myself, and the one thing that I remember after talking to the married couple afterwards is like, even when things go sideways or go wrong, at the end of the day, no one's really going to remember that down the road. They're just going to remember marrying their significant other. So the fact that this jerk kind of got his comeuppance as well is just icing on the cake. But ultimately, you married your love and hopefully you live happily ever after, right? Our next story is, my wife and partner cheated on me while I was in the military with my best friend. I made sure they never had a moment of peace in their lives again. My wife and partner cheated on me while I was away in the military, serving my country, and trying my hardest to make sure that my family was well sustained. When I got to find out, I made sure that she and the one she cheated on me with never got a moment of peace in their lives again. My wife, 32-year-old female, and I, 34-year-old male, had been married for the better part of the last 6 years. We got married almost immediately after we left college, and the reason for this was because we both knew we had to pool in our resources together and ultimately stay together. I know this might not make a lot of sense, but back then we were really broke. And I don't mean your regular low-income broke. Like, we were quite literally broke in all aspects of our lives. I could very well say that the only thing we both had at the time was ourselves. And I couldn't say that this didn't bother me greatly at the time, because it definitely did. My wife, let's call her A, was still receiving some little stipends from her parents, and that was what the both of us were living off of. And for the next few years after we hurriedly got married, things got even more intense. We were living feeding from hand to mouth, and it wasn't seeming like there was any help coming from anyone at all. Both my parents were already late, and I was the only child from both of them. I was even lucky to have gotten financial support and aid from my uncle, who was feeling quite reluctant to help me, in the sense that he didn't feel the need, or rather the obligation, to do so, even though there were still quite a number of assets that were left behind for me by my parents. He, however, changed his mind. After much persuasion from his wife and some of my other aunties, mostly my mother's sisters. Now, moving on. After I thought long and hard on what I was going to do and whether or not things were going to remain the same between A and myself for the next few years, I finally decided that I was going to join the military, as I heard there were several great benefits to joining. And I won't deny the fact that I definitely got drafted in the military simply because of the money, because I definitely did. This has to be by far one of the biggest regrets I've ever had in my entire life. Well, at least that was how I felt at the very beginning. Right before joining the military, I didn't have a lot of people to consort. family or friends alike. The only person whose opinion really mattered to me at the time was none other than my best friend from my childhood day, Dan, and of course my wife, A. And they had both managed to convince me fully that this was the best option available to me at the time, and it honestly felt like they had my best interest at heart. And so there was little to no hesitation on my path. I went into the military with a confident and determined mentality. This was all soon washed away, in all manner, shape, and form. Now, let me break it down to you in a way that would be very simple for you or anyone else reading this to understand. First of all, the military is not some place for you to come if you're looking for some quick cash, or even a place for a mediocre or lackadaisical attitude and mindset. Secondly, the chain of command is something you have to get used to, regardless of age, sex, or any other factors or variables. I learned this the hard way. Thirdly, there are always consequences for every single one of your actions, and you're definitely held responsible for any and everything you do, whether it be positive or negative. The punishment and reward system is extremely strict and straightforward. Now, a lot of people who just join the military on a whim, or rather rust because they felt like it, would definitely have a hard time in adjusting and understanding where exactly their place is in the military, and even whether or not the military is meant for them. However, this was not me, as I would say that I had more of a steeled resolve than most people. Now, there were still a lot of factors to meet or consider before even getting a military job placement, which would have inadvertently still filtered out a bunch of people. But then they were all still pretty easy for me. Some things like ASVAB and even the basic military training, which has a duration ranging anywhere from 7 to 13 weeks, depending on the training regiment and the training routine. Now, while I was busy with all these, the only thing that kept me going and moving forward was the fact that I still had the support of the people that meant the most to me in my life back at home, and I was definitely looking forward to the next time I was going to be seeing them. As being a new recruit, we weren't allowed or given any day off while the basic training was ongoing, which seemed like it wasn't going to be over anytime soon. It was taking forever, basically, before the training program was going to be over. But before long, it finally was, and I was able to land the role of a cyber operations specialist. I guess this was attributed to my high scores in electronic information, and partially because of my college degree in computer engineering and programming. I was assigned a whole variety of jobs and roles to perform, and most times I was usually unable to make time for my partner, as there was never usually enough time in the day for me to even cart out my duties. This was hard, and it definitely took its toll on us and our relationship. Now, this is where things would begin to get interesting, as it was evident that things were not, or rather have not been okay with the both of us. I decided that I was going to spend the entirety of the day off that I was going to be getting back at home and with her. I was planning on making things somewhat right, as there was no other way I could have effectively expressed how sorry I was about my lack of presence and what was seeming like a lack of interest in the relationship on my own path. And so that's what I did. It did take me quite some time before I was able to come back home and spend some time with my woman, but thankfully I was able to make it work. And I can tell you that this was by far one of the best decisions I had ever made, ever since falling in love with her. Now, when I got back, I could tell that she wasn't happy with me. And I did as planned, and made sure she never lost focus on the fact that my love for her was genuine and wasn't going to diminish. I also took my time to properly explain what it was I was going to be doing, and how time-consuming and absent it was going to make me. I also made a promise to her that no matter what, I was going to come back to her, no matter the cost. And this in and on its own properly cleared the air between the both of us, and we were finally able to move past that and look to the future. Now, from that moment onwards, things were going pretty well, until they weren't anymore. There were some days where I wouldn't be able to even speak with A, for days on end, and when I finally had the time, she was never there. I actually brought this to her notice and complained about this to her, but then she was always trying to avoid this discussion, every single time. Now I made some friends while I was in service, and they were the closest things I had to a sane life while I was in the military. They were literally the people that saw me through some of my toughest times, as it was never always rainbows and sunshine. So I tabled my concern to them at the time, and they would always assure me that this was how relationships outside the military would work, and some even testified to their own relationship following the same path. I even had one brother who could relate my then situation to his own personal situation, as according to him, as we were going through quite literally the exact same thing. Now, long story short, I got quite a few pieces of advice from them and I decided to stick to it. And one of the things I resolved myself to doing was actually making my partner know that I was truly putting in the effort. So from that moment onwards, I started planning another proposal, a proper one this time around, just to give her the feeling of actually getting married and all, as this was something I failed to do initially. It was tough trying to balance everything out. My work, my partner, my life, and planning this trip on top of all that. But thankfully, after a few months, I was able to get things set and sorted out for my return day. And to even make that day all the more special, I decided not to inform her of the day that I was going to be returning. In fact, she wasn't even aware whether or not I was even going to have some days off. I just decided to show up and surprise her, just because of how much she meant to me. And to my greatest surprise, when I walked in, I saw what I know can never be erased from my memory. I actually saw my woman in another man's clothing in our home, and the person she was with, having makeout sessions and all of that with, was none other than my supposed childhood best friend. It was a rough moment for me, one where I was seriously contemplating using my sidearm right then and there in that very moment. It took a lot of restraint and consideration, as I was beyond furious, disappointed, angry, annoyed, and a whole lot of other emotions. However, I was able to exercise proper restraint and I just walked away. A myriad of thoughts flowed through my mind while I was walking away, with a proper ring in hand and flowers. However, the only one I sought to actually act upon was the one that entailed getting revenge and not letting what just happened pass by. Thankfully, neither she nor my best friend had seen or were even aware of my presence, and so the next thing I did from then on was to employ the services of my brother, whom I had served with, and together, with our combined skills, we were able to orchestrate what in my books is the perfect revenge. So what we did was, we got into our house surveillance systems, basically anything that we could see through a monitor, and used that, alongside some other pictures and videos that we took of the both of them, to threaten both herself and my childhood best friend, letting them know that they were either going to keep on paying us a certain sum, or we were going to give what information we had about the both of them to myself, her husband. And seeing as they were both aware that I was in the military, the thought of what I could possibly do to them alone was enough to instill so much fear in them. So much so that it became physically visible. They were always frightened, hyper aware of their surroundings, and never had a moment's rest whether they were together or they were alone. And this was how they both eventually had to part ways. Even when I came home, I could tell that she was always cautious of everything and anything. It was worth it, every single time I spent making her feel this way, and I don't regret it, not one single bit. I definitely didn't forgive her for cheating, as our relationship meant more to me, but then my actions proved sufficient enough for revenge, I guess. With that being said, that's all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed today's video, drop a like and a comment below, and if you want to check out our other videos, check the video on the right. With that being said, I'll see you all next time.